Hi, thanks for joining us. My name's Chad Wiles. I'm the Director of Counseling and Education at the Nehemiah Project. I'm joined here by my partner,
Mike Linstead. I'm the president and co-founder of the Nehemiah Project.
And so we wanted to come today and just share the story of the Nehemiah Project, but you can't really share the story of the Nehemiah Project without really understanding the story of our co-founder, Mike, because a lot of this came out of your life, your vision for this. Your desire to bring about this came from how you've struggled through your own addictions and saw freedom as well. And so first, before we get to all that, let's understand the past. How did we get there? So what was life like? What was childhood like? Where'd you grow up? That sort of thing.
Yeah. So I grew up in Los Angeles, California, primarily. And really, when I was 2 years old, my parents divorced. They split up, and that really affected me. And it was that. I start with that because that was the event that really planted the seed of self-hatred that blossomed into addiction. You know what I mean? Addiction is not the issue; it's a manifestation of the issue. And so, at 2 years old, my parents split up, and I thought it was my fault. And that's so common, you know. With kids that come from divorced families, but the way that I chose to deal with that was internalize it, stuff it, and my behavior became extremely self-destructive. I mean, I remember times in grade school, you know, particularly when I was going to this school in Los Angeles called Pinecrest, and it was a private school, and they graded your behavior on a red, yellow, and green card system. Okay, so red was the bad kid, yellow was the and the green was the, you know, I call goody two-shoes, right? Yeah. I made it a point to get a red card every day, and not because I had any animosity towards the teacher or any of my peers. I just thought I was the issue. I'm the problem. I'm the reason why my parents split up, and so I decided to go full-fledged as I'll be the problem. You know, I'll take that on as my identity, and so that just basically continued and escalated on throughout my entire life. You know, and it just manifested in different ways.
So when did drugs come into the picture? Obviously, in elementary school, probably not, right? But you, like you said, the seeds of self-hatred, the seeds of all that in there. When did you become introduced to drugs and alcohol?
Sure. So I was introduced to drugs and alcohol early on as a kid because my dad and my mom split up because of my dad's addiction problem. And so, you know, I saw the effects of what drug and alcohol abuse can do to your relationships and to a lot of other aspects of life. And so I made it a point as a kid to go, I'm not going to do that. Fast forward into high school, what kept me from doing those things early on in my high school experience was the fact that I was playing football. And I knew that, well, if I choose to do drugs and drink, my football career is not gonna, you know, be a good one. So when football was over, my senior year is really when I started to go out and party. I could drive, you know, so I had some freedom.
So you had some access.
I had some access. I looked older, so I could actually buy alcohol. So I was supplying the parties with the kegs and all that. So I remember the first time I drank it was at a party, and I drank some vodka or something, and when it went down, I was like, oh, relief, you know, relief. I don't feel like I'm the problem anymore, you know, and so
offer some comfort and some escape.
Comfort and escape, and I drank the whole thing that night, you know, and that was the day one of my drinking career, and from that point on, I never looked back.
And how old were you again at that?
I was 18. 18 years old.
Okay, so talk us through where did that lead you to, just over the next few years?
Absolutely. So it didn't stop with alcohol. You know, I left high school, graduated, went to San Luis Obispo, California for junior college, and I moved up there with a bunch of my high school friends. And, you know, I think minimum wage at that time in California was like $6.75 an hour. And so we had 10 guys in a house. And we were barely making enough money to pay the rent and the bills. And so, you know, partying was always fun. It was an aspect of our life, but I got introduced to weed in college, and I was like, well, this is cool. You know, I didn't really enjoy it as much as I enjoyed drinking, but I saw that there was money to be made. And so that opened up a whole new realm of my drug and alcohol abuse. And so I started with weed, started selling weed as a way to, you know, have more money, and also to take on a new identity, because, you know, my whole child life was, who am I, you know, and I saw myself as the problem. And so now I have this item, weed, And it gave me a certain level of power over other people. You know, I had what they wanted, and I liked that position.
Yeah, right.
And so that was 19 years old. And then it escalated. It went to the harder drugs, you know, ecstasy, cocaine, all those things, then prescription drugs,
right.
you know. So basically anything I could get, I not only wanted to do it myself, but I wanted to not have to pay for it and then supply other people with it, you know. And so that fed my identity that I was building, which was, oh, you're a drug dealer, you know, you're a good-looking guy that all the girls want, you know, you're successful. Because at the same time, I was still going to school. Right. I was manager at my job. I was playing rugby for the college.
Okay.
I mean, I was doing all the things that I guess quote-unquote normal people do.
Right.
But at night, I was just totally other person. You know what I mean? So that continued on to about 22 years old, and that's really where life hit me with a lot of hard things.
So I think a lot of stories begin with that kind of story, right? Where we often talk about in counseling that we call that idolatry, right? Where we find an idol in something, your worth in something, right? And we always say idols promise everything and they take away everything. In the beginning, you start to get what you want. And so you're describing these few years where it was kind of giving you everything you wanted, but then it takes away everything. Describe that part of the story where you're enslaved and it starts to take away life.
For sure. So from 18 to 22, it gave me everything I wanted, everything in my heart desired.
Right.
At 22, I got hit with a lot of like life punches, I call them. So at 22, my dad was diagnosed with stomach cancer. And my dad and I had a good relationship. My mother and him had a great divorce relationship. I saw him all the time. He got sober. So I really loved my dad. And when he got diagnosed with stomach cancer, it was like, what, you know?
Right.
But not only was my dad diagnosed with stomach cancer, also my aunt, and then me, and then 5 other people on my dad's side of my family.
Wow.
So it was like 7 people included.
That's like unheard of.
Yeah, 7 people with all those people I just mentioned, 7 people total. And then on top of that, my grandmother and my grandfather both died from old age. So I just got like boom, boom, boom. And look, I had nothing to run to, no God to run to. Right. Although I was participating in the youth group, you know, scene as a high school student, I turned my back on all that, not because I had any animosity towards the church. I just wanted to do what the world was doing. That looked fun. Right. So I had nothing to run to when life started hitting me, you know. So I ran to my God. That was drugs and alcohol. And I remember the night I watched my dad pass away. I was also in a band. We had our first show that night. Wow. And the girl that I was dating at the time, I remember what she said to me. She said, "You want to drink, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And so it was just different that time, you know. And that night started the drinking a fifth every night, and that progressed on to, from 22 to 25, my story becomes a typical addict alcoholic story, you know. All the relationships in my life, I burned the bridges with, dropped out of college, went through multiple jobs, in and out of jails, in and out of institutions, in and out of rehabs. Right. Found myself at 25 living under a bridge in San Luis Obispo, California, physically addicted to alcohol to where I was actually having epileptic seizures. Yeah. If I didn't drink like a pint of vodka first thing in the morning. I was diagnosed with over 8 different psychotropic and narcotic medications. I mean, everything you can think of. Right. And then on top of that, I was on the street, so heroin, meth.
So at this point, you're homeless.
Homeless, sleeping on 2 pallets, a piece of cardboard, my backpack, and my sweater was a pillow. Yeah. Like the real homeless, sleeping in the car and sleeping on friends' couches. That phase had already passed out. They kicked me out. I lost my car. You know what I mean? Right. So I had lost everything, other than the clothes on my back.
So what do you do at that point? Obviously, desperate, on the streets. At that point, probably just waiting to die.
Absolutely, you know? Waiting to die.
So what changed it? What turned it around? And I want you to kind of share even the contrast, because you said you'd been through institutions, you had tried to get help before. So what was the turnaround, and what was the difference between the new hope versus the other things that you've tried?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, you know, I had been, you know, into rehabs, in and out of institutions, and all those things were seemingly necessary steps to kind of get over this thing called addiction, you know. Right. And I had that approach to a lot of things in my life. College was one of those things, for example. Like, I didn't really want to go to college. Right. It's just like, oh, what am I supposed to do now? You know, I had no direction because I didn't know who I was. And because I didn't know who I was, I didn't know what my purpose was. So there was like these massive foundational things that were missing in my life. And they can't be found without Christ.
Right.
This is my opinion. This is what the Bible says.
Right.
And I didn't have Christ. And so, here I am. I wake up under that bridge. It's a Sunday morning. I'm running around with these two guys that had just recently got out of prison. They were these Mexican guys, and they're older than me. But they were trying to get sober as well. And so we were going to Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, I didn't know what else to do.
Right.
I had done that song and dance for a long time, but we didn't know what else to do. So this particular Sunday morning, I woke up and I had this overwhelming sense that I needed to go to church. And I hadn't been to a church in like, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years. I can't remember.
Right.
But it had been a long time. And I just had this overwhelming sense I needed to go to church. I didn't say anything about it. I just had this sense. So wake up, we go to the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And after that meeting, his prison name, the two guys I was running with, one of the guys' prison name was Gato, and I never knew his real name. And the other guy was Victor. That's his real name. So Gato and Victor told me, hey, Mike, we're about to go down the street to this church. It's called Mercy Church. You want to go? And I thought that was strange because I didn't know that these guys were even going to church.
Right.
And I certainly didn't tell them I felt like I needed to go to church.
Right.
So all these things were being orchestrated, So I said, sure, let's go. So we walked down the street to this church called Mercy Church. And it was probably about a 400 to 600 person church. It wasn't this massive mega church. But I sat and listened to that preacher, and the Holy Spirit was just cutting me right to the heart. Like everything he was saying, I was going, that's me. That's me. That's me. And he was talking about sin. He was talking about salvation.
Right.
The bad news and the good news. And I was just like, gosh, that's me. So he did an altar call. And, he said this, which really made me think, all right, there's something going on here. He said, I feel like there's people in this room that have turned their back on Christ and that they need to come back. If that's you, put your hand up in the air. Boom, my hand just shot up.
Yeah.
My hand just shot up. Like I didn't even make a voluntary action. It just went up,
Right.
And I kept it up. And so once the whole service was over, they at that particular church, it was really great. If you responded to an altar call, they hooked you up with somebody in the church to disciple you, to show you what you just raised your hand for,
Right.
And that individual who God put in my path, his name was Matthew Ines. And it just so happens that Matthew Ines had already had a relationship with those two Mexican guys that I was running the street with.
Yeah.
And he was employing them because he owned his own business. So it was just a God thing. I didn't realize it then, but life is usually better understood looking backwards.
Sure.
So I look back and I go, God is all over this thing, And so I met Matthew Ines. We had that disciple type of relationship.
Yeah.
He just basically told me, hey, man, like anything that I can do to help you, I want to do. If you want to get together and we can talk about Jesus, we could talk about your life, we can talk about anything you want. I just want you to know that I'm here for you. I'm here for you. And, I've talked to him since, and he's told me there was times I was at his house that I was a total zombie. Because I may have raised my hand and said, I want that, referring to salvation.
Right.
But after I left that church, I was still on the street.
Right.
I was still surrounded by drugs and alcohol. Nothing had changed in my location, my environment. So I started using again. And he told me, there's times that I've been to his house and I didn't even know I was there. And that broke my heart. But sadly, about a month after I met Matt, I ended up overdosing. And I was found in the middle of the street. My skin was the color of blue. I woke up in the hospital and they said my heart was beating 4 beats per minute.
Wow.
I remember I woke up, had a couple doctors standing around me kind of scratching their heads like, Mike, you should be brain dead at best.
Right.
And it didn't mean anything to me back then. I was so hopeless.
Right.
But now I know it's like when doctors are saying we don't really know.
Right.
Well, what else can you appeal to? It has to be God. You know
Right.
what I mean? And so from that point in the hospital is really where I had to make a serious choice. I had mentioned, I've been to institutions before, and one of those institutions was a mental institution. I was actually 5150'd.
Explain to people what that means.
5150 is a psychiatric 72-hour hold in a psychiatric facility. So the way that I got there is I told police officers when they were called to come pick me up. This was years before this particular hospital visit. I told those police officers that I heard voices in my head telling me to kill myself.
Yeah.
And I was pretty drunk when I said that, and I don't think I actually heard those voices.
Right.
I may have, but I don't think I actually did. I was just desperate. I didn't know what to do.
Right.
And so they are obliged, legally binded by law to take a guy. So
Right.
so that's what a 5150 is, and so that's a serious problem. That's a serious thing to have on your record. And so after I'd overdosed, I'm in the hospital. The doctor comes in to me and he says, Michael, we need to make a decision as to what you're going to do from this point on, because we can't let you leave because you have illegal warrants out for your arrest. And you've got a record. You've got a serious record of dual diagnosis, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I have to ask you a question, is what he said to me. And the question is, was what you did a legitimate suicide attempt, or was it an accidental overdose? And that was it. And so I sat there and I thought, and I looked him in the eye and I said, man, if I was to die, I wouldn't care. And I'm absolutely sure nobody else would care. You can call it whatever you want, but that's where I'm at right now. Mm-hmm. And by the grace of God, they did not deem it a suicide attempt, because if they did, because of my past record, I would be in a Tascadero State Mental Hospital right now, probably not alive. And so they decided that it was an accidental overdose, and they gave me an option to go to a program. And so I called Matt Ines, and I said, Matt, this is what's going on in my life. I've been to all the rehabs in this area. It's the Central Coast of California, and I'd been to all of them.
Right.
Where can I go? And he told me about this place in Los Angeles called the Dream Center. And the Dream Center is a non-denominational church that really does a Monday through Saturday type of ministry where they house people for free.
Right.
And one of their biggest programs there is called discipleship, and that's their recovery program. And Matt told me about it, and he said, you can go live there for free. Mm-hmm. You don't have to have health insurance, and you can stay there for 1, 2, or 3 years. You can stay there as long as you need to. And that was the first glimmer of hope that that I'd heard ever since I really got down on life. And so I decided to go there, and it was at the Dream Center where God really started to reveal who he was through the scriptures. And that changed everything.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm hearing you say is the difference between this program that helped you versus others was a hope in Christ.
Absolutely.
That your identity was being shifted and changed,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about, okay, you're in the Dream Center. What was sobriety looking like? Like how did like everyday life look like, and lead us into how you ended up here in Mandeville, Louisiana?
Yeah, so I always have a smile on my face about the Dream Center. It was such an intense, 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's a work therapy based program. So when you go there, the Dream Center itself is 400,000 square feet, and they need a labor force essentially to operate it, because not only do they have recovery programs there, but they also have a college and a foster kids ministry and a sex trafficking ministry, and churches from all around the world come to visit this place. It's massive. And so the disciples, that's what we're called, we're the ones that run it. So we make the food, we clean all the floors, we do everything.
Right.
And so from 5:30 in the morning to 10 p.m. at night, your every minute is planned for you. You have no freedom. And it's not like in a dictatorship type of way. It's just, you've obviously demonstrated you can't handle freedom.
Right.
So we're going to plan it for you.
Right.
And a part of the work therapy program it's not only a work therapy program, it's also a curriculum heavy Bible teaching program. So, we have requirements. We have to read, particular portions of the Bible every week and memorize scripture and renew the mind as I came to learn. And so really the way that God revealed himself to me through his word was, one of my first jobs was night security. And it sounds kind of cool, but ultimately all it was a glorified human alarm clock, I had to stay up on the floor. It's a 15-story building that we were in. And the floor I lived on was a 12th floor. And I was the guy in charge of turning the lights off, making sure no one's messing around. They're supposed to be in their bed. And then at 5:30, flicking the lights on and telling everyone time to get up. And so I had all night to do what? We weren't allowed to read anything but the Bible or books about the Bible. And so that's when God had me cornered. I had to read the scriptures, and I got to read the scriptures all night. And I did night security for 5 months. So I scoured the Bible, and it was one particular portion of scripture that God he hit me. I've always been like a cerebral person. I always enjoy learning. And it was Proverbs chapter 2 where, and I'll paraphrase, but essentially in the first 6 verses, it's a conditional statement. There's 3 ifs. And essentially what they're saying is, if you desire my word, if you search my word like it's $1 billion, I'll just give it in today's words, and you call out for understanding, then you will understand the fear of the Lord, and you will find the knowledge of God. And when I read that, I said, well, that's a no-brainer. Who wouldn't want the knowledge of God?
Right.
And I didn't understand what the fear of the Lord meant at that point. So I was
Right.
like, the knowledge of God, yeah, who wouldn't want that?
Right.
So that kind of kickstarted me into my biblical studies program, if you want to call it that. And then, I stayed there for 3 years. So I had a lifetime full of rebellious, manipulative, deceptive practices, and God had to undo all that and humble me hardcore, and he did in his loving way. I never left the Dream Center. Really for those 3 years, there was a point where I graduated, left to go help build a church in South Central Los Angeles, ended up relapsing there, came back to the Dream Center, and from that point, the rest is history.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot happened during those 2 years, but really God drew me to himself through the study of his word.
Yeah. Because one of the things you talked about too is when everybody's diagnosed with stomach cancer, you included.
Right.
When did that, I know you ended up having surgery for that. When did that happen? Was that while you were at the Dream Center?
That was actually back when life was kind of hitting me with all those punches.
Okay, so you had it then, before you were on the street.
When I was 22, I had my stomach removed, and before I was on the street.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a miracle in itself too.
And so that didn't affect me being in the program at all. It was really just take the stomach out and learn how to eat again, And I still, have some serious issues with certain types of food. It makes me nauseous and sick, but God made a resilient body in all of us, and the body adapts.
So, okay, you're in the Dream Center, you relapsed, now you're back. How do you end up in Mandeville, Louisiana?
Yeah.
What happens there?
Yeah. So the discipleship program is a 12-month program. In my first 12 months, I met this girl. Her name's Mandy. And I met her when I was in week 52 of my first year. And she was a volunteer from Louisiana. She drank once in her whole life, absolutely hated it, never's done drugs.
Right.
We couldn't be more opposite in terms of how we were raised and the things we like to do and all of that up until that point. But I was working in the intake, as an intake coordinator for the program, and she was working in the curriculum department.
Okay.
And the only thing that separated me and her was, this little cubicle.
Right.
I was not allowed to talk to her because of the program I was in, but I was a rebellious guy. And so I saw Mandy and I was just like, wow, she's amazing. She's got to have a boyfriend. She's got to have some sort of Hillsong, Christian rock star boyfriend or something, Right. And so Mandy and I just developed just sort of like a relationship, and I got in trouble for talking to her many times. And so I extended that 12-month program to a 19-month program. So Mandy and I developed a relationship. We found out that, we're interested in each other, which I still don't understand to this day from her perspective.
Like, why would you be?
Why would you choose this guy? You know what I mean? But she ended up leaving the Dream Center, and I ended up leaving the Dream Center. We had a long distance relationship, and she was actually, we were an item throughout my first relapse, and that was really hard, for her especially, because her and her family, because they really had no experience with this kind of thing, you know. And so by the grace of God, she didn't decide to leave me. I went back into the program, and now God, my relationship with God got much tighter, even though I relapsed. Some pastors came into my life that really taught me like how to study the scriptures the right way, or one of the right ways.
Right.
And it really spoke some serious truth into my life about the seriousness of sin and how that even though you're saved, like you're still held accountable for what you do. And there's no condemnation for you. But if you're still living the way you were living before you got saved, are you really saved?
Right.
And I had never heard anything like that. So the fear of the Lord, I started to understand. I went, wow, okay. So I go back into the Dream Center, and at this point I go, all right, God has been gracious to me. He hasn't let me die.
Right.
He also hasn't taken Mandy out of my life. This is the real deal.
Right.
So I just immediately was like, I need to be just open to whatever comes my way. And God started to humble me seriously. My first job in the work therapy program, my second time through the program, was I was in charge of the trash truck, the trash pile.
Right.
And I tell you what, me and this guy named Rodney John, who I'd love to get involved in this program. Me and him were the guys who were in charge of the trash truck. And I remember me and Rodney, one day we walked out to that trash truck. It was hot blacktop, right? Los Angeles, 100 degrees, just rotting fruit and vegetables. And we made a decision together. We said, you know what? God's put us here for a reason. And if we let this lifeless pile of garbage dictate the quality of our life, we had no business in his kingdom. straight up.
Right.
You know, and Rodney was a hard guy like that, and me and him, we vibed off each other.
Right.
And so we made a decision that day that, look, first of all, we don't deserve any better than this,
Right.
and secondly, we are better than this, right? And not in a prideful way. It's like, dude, it's just a bunch of rotting vegetables.
Right.
You're a man created in the image of God. Like, come on, man. So we started to learn, like, you know, we started to walk
Right.
with God. I started to walk with God and,
Right.
and really understand the grace that He'd given me, and kind of never looked back, you know. At the end of it was called the Genesis program.
Yeah.
When you come back into discipleship, at the end of that program was 7.5 months, because I got demoted again. Dude, I'll just say this. I took a 12-month program and extended it into 26 total months. All right, that's this guy.
That's right.
Okay.
But you made it.
At the end of that 26 months
Yeah.
is when God did a sovereign work in my heart, and He literally, in this 9 a.m. church service, gave me a vision, and I've only had 2 of these kind of experiences in my life. And I was standing in this church service, no special speaker. My heart was filled with gratitude, just enjoying there was like 1,500 people in that church.
Right.
Just listening to them worship God, and all of a sudden I'm caught up in a vision. And I'm getting led somewhere quickly by what I perceived to be the Spirit of God. Wasn't anything visible
Right.
leading me. I was being led though.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we stop, and there's this little root coming up out of the ground. And it's like this gray, whimpering, pathetic looking root.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't hear an audible voice, but it was on my heart that, Michael, this is what you've been giving all the power to. In other words, this is what's controlling your decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw it, I went, well, Lord, get rid of it then.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I said that, in my heart of hearts, a sword popped up and started chopping this root to pieces. And I was like, now mind you, I'm standing in a room full of 1,500 people. My eyes are closed. This is going on up here. Right? They have no idea what I'm doing or what's going on with me. And I realized what was happening. I said, Lord, get rid of the whole thing. When I said that, it started going down into the dirt.
Right.
And this root screaming, and like a blood-curdling scream. And finally, pop, 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 pop. Whew, this root just comes flying out. At that point, I felt a physical shift in my chest, and I threw my hands up and just started screaming hallelujah.
Yeah.
And from that point, I've never desired alcohol again.
Wow.
I have never desired alcohol again.
That's
so
awesome.
whatever happened in that,
Yeah.
it's changed me permanently.
Right.
And I've been sober ever since.
That's
Never
awesome.
taken a pill, never taken a drink, never smoked. I mean, nothing. You know?
Right.
And so it took that 12-month program turned into a 2.5-year program, basically. That's what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That's what I needed. And
Right,
so
right.
after I had that experience, I went into the transitions program, and that's when I got certified as a personal trainer, and decided I wanted to move out to Mandeville, Louisiana, and get married to Mandy.
Yeah.
And that's how I got here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you get here, you start. How did you end up with Pelican Athletic Club? Because you're a trainer there.
Yeah.
How did you end up in that job?
Yeah. So, like I said, I got certified at the Dream Center to be a personal trainer. I flew out to Louisiana after I made the decision that I was going to move to Louisiana in order to get married to Mandy. And I was checking out the clubs kind of in New Orleans, you know, the gyms and the different little boutique clubs and stuff. And I was checking them out in New Orleans and in Mandeville, and kind of, they're okay, you know.
Yeah.
And in Los Angeles, if anything was called Los Angeles Athletic Club, that's probably not the most pristine. It's probably like a community center type of thing.
Yeah.
So when Mandy was like, I want to take you to this place called Pelican Athletic Club, I was a little resistant initially, but that was just my own bias.
Right.
But how I got to Pelican Athletic Club when I was on that little trip to Louisiana was that Mandy had to go back to work. And it was a Monday, and I was going back the next day, which was a Tuesday. And so she got me a massage scheduled at Pelican Athletic Club. So I went there, had a leg workout, and trained my legs, and then went and got a massage. And before I went into the massage, I asked the lady at the front desk, her name's Hope.
Yeah.
I asked her, I said, you know, if I was going to get a job here, how would I go about filling out the application? Is it a physical copy or is it online? And she said it's a physical copy. So she said she'd love to give me one after my massage if I'd like. And I said, okay, I'll pick it up after my massage. So I'm getting my massage, and I'm thinking in my head, well, I'm not going to be able to really check up on this thing, you know, so I don't think I'm going to do it, you know. So when I finished my massage, I just passed Hope and left. And she didn't see me, so it wasn't weird. But I passed Hope and left. And so Mandy and I went to lunch at this place called Coffee Rainey.
Yeah.
Pac ends up calling Mandy's phone. Hope was on the line, and she said, hey, Mandy, your boyfriend Michael said that he wanted an application. I just want to let you know that I have that for him. And also, the director of human resources would love to interview him for the job. I was like, I heard her on the phone. I was like, let's go back. Because I hadn't even filled out an application. You know, I was just there to get a workout in.
Yeah.
The reason why all that happened is because the night before, I felt God call me into prayer to ask for provision.
Yeah.
So I prayed the night before, and that's what happened. So went back to Pelican Athletic Club. Long story short, I ended up in an interview with, and they said, we'd love for you to work here. We'll wait for, because I told them I couldn't be there or be back here for at least another 4 to 6 months. And they said, we'll wait. I said,
that's awesome.
What? You know,
God.
so another miracle, you know.
Yeah.
And that's really that's the story of my life, dude. It's just, there's no reason I should even be able to speak at this point, much less be a personal trainer.
That's awesome. Well, to kind of speed up the process, you end up meeting one of our pastors, Sam. You end up at our church, the Field Church, which we were here planting a church ourselves, and it was growing. And, you know, for me, my background is biblical counseling as well. And one of our big hearts in coming here to this area is because of suicide rates are 7% higher than the national average, and drug addiction, especially heroin and some of the drugs, are really prevalent in this area. And so I have been trying to pray through and think through how could we really make a difference in this area that is really lacking any sort of programs like the Dream Center.
Yeah.
And so over the course of a couple years, you know, we'd been friends, and you'd been in my community group and did your premarital counseling and all that fun stuff with you and Mandy. And I remember, and you can kind of tell your side of the story, I remember I went on vacation this past summer, and God just put on my heart this vision for counseling. And it was this little 3-pronged approach thing that I drew out. Yeah. And I was like, man, I want to meet with Mike and just share with him. And one of the things on that prong was, man, I want to do something like the Dream Center, like you had told me about. Yeah. And I was thinking just like, you know, just a ministry within our, like just trying to figure it out. Yeah. And so anyway, after sharing that with you, everything explodes. So you kind of take it from your side of this story. Yeah.
I mean, so the Nehemiah Project was just something that it was a name I gave to this idea that you'd shared with me. And, you know, coming from that lifestyle, I saw something that actually worked. Right. Because like I said, I'd been to other rehabs. Right. They didn't work. I was drinking in the rehab sometimes. Right. But this actually worked. I was like, I have to do something about this. And so really what thrust me into it was the death of a guy that God had brought into my life. He was a guy who was just my age here in Mandeville. Right. And his name was Sean. And we started to develop a disciple-type relationship. And he was really excited because he got a job offer. And, you know, for a lot of people coming out of addiction world, it's hard to get a job again. Right. Usually we have legal records and things that are huge roadblocks. So he was excited that he had gotten offered a good high-paying job. And I was rejoicing with him. But I told him, I said, Sean, it's down in New Orleans, man. I said, where'd you used to get high? In New Orleans? It's all right. You go back down to New Orleans chasing money. Dude, you and I both know you're high before you even know it hits you. Right. And I could see it in his eyes that he knew. Yeah, you're right. And he ended up taking that job anyways. Yeah. And next thing you know, I get a call. Yeah, Sean found with a needle in his arm, in his car. Overdose. And I was, you know, this was fairly recently. This is less than a year ago now. Right. And I just finally had enough. This is the third person since I lived in Mandeville that's died from heroin that I know. Right. I said, I can't believe it. I got to do something about this. So when you and I started our discipleship relationship, and you told me, I've got this vision that I want to do, I was like, I've got this same exact vision. Right. And we both have different aspects that are necessary to help people through this. Right. So let's get this thing going. And so we started looking up ideas on how to actually do this. Yeah. And God had, a year prior to us starting to meet, you know, put on my heart to start my own fitness business. So I was kind of learning the nuts and bolts and the boring stuff. Right. And so I felt a little bit more confident in the Lord that we could do this. Yeah. Because you got one aspect of this, and that's what you're really good at, that's what God has called you to do. And same thing with me. I've got a different aspect. Right. And so together, I just knew this was right, you know, and I've received so many confirmations since then. Right. It's been awesome to see how God's bringing all the pieces together. Yeah. Even the name Nehemiah Project, we were just doing that as discipleship. And it was just like, this is what we got to call it. Like the rebuilding of someone's life, like the walls of Jericho. And so just as we close out, just describe to people, what is the Nehemiah Project? What are our goals? What are our hopes to see accomplished through the Nehemiah Project? Well, like you mentioned, we were studying the book of Nehemiah, and the story of Nehemiah is a story of a man named Nehemiah, whose name, by the way, means Jehovah comforts. And, the story is an amazing story about how God basically calls this man to lead his people back into the city of Jerusalem after they've been exiled for 70 years. All according to the prophecies made by all the prophets, the major prophets in the Bible. And so Nehemiah, it's interesting in this book, by the way, it's a side note, God never speaks in that book. Right? It's all assumed. And Nehemiah prays. And so I knew that when we started meeting, man, like God's putting us on our heart. And we're reading this book for a reason. So the Nehemiah Project is really just something that's grown out of us studying that book. And why it exists is to help people out of the bondage of addiction through the revelation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. To disciple them in their knowledge of the truth, and also to help shape them into financial leaders in their homes and communities. We exist to fully rehabilitate, if you want to say it this way, the addicted person out of that life and into a new life. And we do it because we truly believe, I know you and I believe this, we truly believe that since man and women are made in the image of God, that all their problems are theological in nature. Meaning how they see God is of the utmost importance. So that's all what the Nehemiah Project is trying to do. We're catering to those individuals that are in the realm of addiction, in bondage, and we're showing them the light of the gospel. And then once if they choose to accept it, we're going to take them from there. And I'm only doing this in this way because I've experienced it. You've experienced it. We know it works.
And we know that, from our perspective, biblically, it's the only thing that really is going to provide true freedom. To piggyback on something you said there, I was just thinking, there's so many who feel like you felt when they're addicted, the shame, the worthlessness, for whatever reason you're addicted, but feeling like and society kind of treats you as if like you're broken.
Absolutely.
And you can't be rehabilitated, right?
Absolutely.
And we don't believe that. We believe that God has created us all for a purpose. Ephesians 2:10 tells us that, right? And so we know that there is a future and a hope for those who are struggling with addiction. And so we not only want to help you get sober, but we want to help you lead the life that God's called you to lead. We want to help give you support and instruction and whatever help we can so you can go be a guy who starts his own business like you have. To be a guy who not only contributes to society, but gives other people opportunities too. And so we want to rehabilitate in a holistic way, not just focus on only sobriety, right? And so how can people get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to our website, nehemiahproject.org. You can see what we're all about there. You can sign up to volunteer there. You can certainly donate there. However God calls you to be a part of this project, we want you to know that we want you, okay? Not just your resources, you in and of yourself, whatever God has called you to provide for this project, you're absolutely valuable. And so especially if you're a business owner, a business leader, like we've mentioned, we want you to come in on Saturdays and teach our guys and girls the basics of business. We want our people to know that they have tremendous capacity and tremendous value because they've been created by God, who is tremendous and absolutely valuable in and of his own right.
Absolutely.
So they can go to our website, they can go to our Facebook page, they can get connected that way.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks so much for listening to our story, listening to what God has put on our hearts to do. Our hope is to see him transform this community, as well as we have hopes and dreams for expansion for future communities. And so journey with us. Check us out on our website. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Cool. What do you think?
Good deal. Yeah, great.
See?
It was good.